She used to call me Mom. Then she started calling me a burden. I gave her life. She gave me invoices. Warnings not to embarrass her. When I needed a ride to the oncologist, she sent an Uber. When I called her, it went to voicemail. But when her ex, the woman she now despises, showed up with soup and music, I started to see everything clearly. And by the time the will was read, so did everyone else. Before we dive in, if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, please like, subscribe, and share. These real betrayals and quiet comebacks are stories too many people live through in silence. Let's make sure they're heard. I raised her to speak with conviction, to never be afraid of who she loved or what she wanted. I told her she could burn bridges if the other side wasn't safe, and maybe that's what burned me in the end. Her name is Rachel. She was born breech, screaming, with a grip strong enough to twist my hospital gown. That grip held me for 28 years, through scraped knees, broken hearts, and late-night phone calls that began with "Mom, are you awake?" Even though she knew I always was. I was her anchor, her champion, the one who told her she was enough when the world tried to suggest otherwise. When she came out to me, there was no pause, just pride. And when she brought home Melissa, soft-spoken, thoughtful Melissa, I didn't hesitate. I welcomed her into our home with a lasagna and a stitched quilt. That dinner was laughter. That relationship, I thought, was legacy. I helped them move into their first apartment, gave them money when rent ran thin, and stood front row at their wedding, wearing blue, Rachel's favorite color, because she once said I looked beautiful in it. We had a rhythm. Texts every morning. Calls every Thursday. I'd visit for dinners, holidays, birthdays. But then the silence began. It started with missed calls. Then came the "I'm swamped," the "Melissa's family's in town," and finally, nothing at all. What I didn't know was that my daughter's love had an expiration date, and the moment I became inconvenient, I became invisible. It started with a tremor. A little shake in my hand when I reached for the kettle one morning. I laughed it off. At 68, a little rust in the joints felt inevitable. But then I started forgetting words, slurring them, mixing up my pills. And on one of the colder mornings of that year, I fell. No major injury, just a bruise and embarrassment, but it was enough for my doctor to run a battery of tests. Parkinson's. Early stage. Not a death sentence, but a life-altering one. When I told Rachel, she sighed. Not cried. Not paused. Just sighed. "Mom, this is going to make things really hard." She wasn't wrong, but it wasn't the kind of hard I imagined. She didn't come over. Didn't bring groceries. She sent links to support forums and voice memos filled with therapists speak about boundaries. "You can't expect me to drop everything," she said. "Melissa and I are trying to get back on track." Back on track. That was the first I'd heard that they were off track. The second came weeks later. Melissa moved out. No explanation, no emotion. Just silence again. I didn't press. I couldn't. I was learning how to walk with a cane, how to sign paperwork with my non-dominant hand. My world was shrinking: appointments, home aides, balance exercises, mild pills that made me tired and sad. I tried to keep our bond alive. Sent her updates. Asked for help gently. But her replies came slower, colder. Until one day, no reply at all. If this part of the story makes you angry or hits close to home, drop a comment with "I'm still here." Let's make sure voices like this don't get erased. Her voice came through the door before I even opened it. Marilyn. I brought lentil soup and that album you loved. Melissa, the woman my daughter had once sworn to love forever and now wouldn't speak of unless it was to mock or dismiss. It had been over a year since their split. Rachel never gave me details, only bitterness. She was controlling, she'd said. She always made everything about her. But standing in my doorway, with windblown hair and the scent of soup rising from her tote bag, Melissa looked like the only person who still remembered I existed. I didn't ask questions. I simply said, "Come in." That first visit turned into many. She started showing up every Wednesday, then Tuesdays and Thursdays too. Sometimes she brought groceries. Sometimes she helped organize my meds. Sometimes we just sat and listened to the old jazz albums her and Rachel used to dance to in the living room. It should have been awkward. It never was. There were days Melissa would read to me, or laugh so hard at one of my sarcastic comments that she nearly choked on tea. She reminded me what warmth felt like, what being seen looked like. Meanwhile, Rachel had vanished. She stopped returning my calls. Not even a read receipt on messages. At one point, a mutual acquaintance let slip that Rachel had told people I'd moved into assisted living. I hadn't. I was still in my home, still fighting every day for independence, dignity, routine. And while my daughter erased me from her present, Melissa quietly built herself into my future. One day, during a routine hospital visit, the nurse handed me a form. "Emergency contact?" she asked. And without hesitation, I wrote down Melissa's name. If you've ever been surprised by who stayed in your life and who disappeared, comment, it's always the unexpected ones. The idea came to me while lying awake one night, watching the shadows stretch across my ceiling like veins. It wasn't bitterness. It was clarity. Rachel wasn't coming back. Not as my daughter. Not as my caregiver. Not even as a person who remembered who I was. She had moved on, and I had Melissa. So I made the call. My lawyer, Joseph, had handled my husband's affairs years ago.
He remembered me.
Still had the photo of my late husband on his bookshelf, the one where we were laughing on a boat neither of us knew how to steer. "I want to change my will," I said plainly. There was a pause on the line, then a gentle, "Of course. Who are the new beneficiaries?" I said her name without flinching. "Melissa." He cleared his throat. "Your daughter's ex-wife?" "No," I said. "My person." I laid it all out. The house, the pension, the little trust fund I'd set up when I retired from the school district. Jewelry, family heirlooms, all of it. Joseph didn't question me. He just asked if I was sure. "I'm as sure as I was when I walked Rachel to the altar," I said. "And even more sure now." Melissa didn't know. I never told her. I didn't need her to love me more for it. I just needed to know that when my body gave out, someone kind would carry the weight of my life forward with care. Rachel had abandoned her roots. Melissa watered them. I died in my sleep. No drama. No last-minute hospital call. Just a quiet passing, wrapped in a blanket Melissa had knitted during one of her many silent stays beside me. When the news reached Rachel, she didn't cry. She flew in. She made calls. She scheduled the funeral without asking Melissa or anyone. She chose the venue, picked the floral arrangements, and emailed distant relatives with my obituary. Carefully edited to exclude Melissa entirely. Survived by her daughter Rachel, it said. No mention of the woman who wiped my mouth when the tremors were too much, or held my hand when my eyes couldn't focus on the TV. I watched it all from beyond. Or maybe just imagined I did. But I felt it, this performance of grief. The rehearsed sorrow of someone who had already let go long before the final breath. And then came the will. Joseph didn't blink when Melissa walked in holding the key I'd left taped under the flower pot. There was no dramatic reading, no gasps. Just papers. Legal, signed, ironclad. Melissa inherited everything. The house Rachel had assumed would be hers, sold the day after the will was executed. The bank accounts, transferred. The jewelry, boxed and donated to a battered women's shelter, per my instructions. But what really cut was the letter I'd left behind. Not for Melissa, but for Rachel. One page.
Typed.
Folded neatly. It read, "Love is not claimed by birthright. It's proven by presence. You were my child, but Melissa was my daughter. Rachel didn't speak to anyone after that. Just walked out of the lawyer's office, her heels clacking like punctuation marks to a story she thought she had authored. If this ending moved you, hit the like button, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to remember. Real family is what you choose, not just what you're born into. Subscribe for more true stories of justice, legacy, and the people who never saw it coming.